How much fuel reserve is actually required for VFR and IFR operations under Part 91? You may be surprised to know it's not exactly as you thought. Stand by. Sometimes you'll hear pilots out there saying that you don't actually have to land with 30 minutes of reserve for VFR flights. You just have to plan to land with 30 minutes of reserve. Well, that's actually true, but let's take a look at the regulations so we can understand what we mean by that. Under 91.151, it says no person may begin a flight under VFR conditions. So the VFR weather conditions, unless you have enough fuel considering the winds and forecast to get your point of intended landing, and for daytime 30 minutes remaining or 45 minutes remaining. So it actually is placing the emphasis on the planning. You cannot begin that flight under VFR conditions unless you have enough fuel on board the aircraft to get you to the intended point of landing and thereafter the reserve. You may end up landing with 28 minutes, and that's okay. But what you don't want to do is take advantage of this regulation. You don't want to say, well, I don't have to land with 30 minutes, so let's do a couple extra maneuvers out here. If you're operating on the bare minimum fuel reserves and you don't know exactly how much is sloshing around in that tank or how much of that fuel is unusable, you may end up putting yourself in a very bad situation that starves the engine of fuel, and you're now in a fuel exhaustion situation, which could be in violation of 9113, careless and reckless operations. I would always recommend taking at least the bare minimum and trying to fly your flight plan as close as possible as you can, or taking more fuel. Now, here's the interesting part. Under 91.167, it says no person may operate an aircraft in IFR conditions. IFR conditions are defined under 1.1, which those definitions are applicable to Part 91 as essentially conditions that are less than what are required for VFR flight rules. So if you're in an airspace and you're required to maintain 500 feet below a cloud, but now you're 300 feet below the cloud, you're technically in an IFR condition, and that VFR condition reserve is now out the window. You now have to comply with 91.167, which requires you not to just plan for it, but you have to carry enough fuel to get to your point of intended landing, and then if an alternate's required, 45 minutes after.